one of the reasons why, well, I mean, Yahweh, he created the institution of marriage for lots of different reasons, but one of the big ones is that marriage is a symbol that represents our relationship with Yahweh. It represents Israel's relationship with Yeshua. So Yeshua made a covenant with his bride in Luke 22:20, and he paid a price for his bride, 1 Corinthians 6:20. And he's gone to prepare a place, John 14:3, and we are betrothed to him, 2 Corinthians 11:2. And so a lot of people are like, why do we need to do betrothal? You know, why is this important? Well, if we want our marriages to look like Yahweh's marriage to us, we want to emulate that. And this is the way Yahweh did it. Hosea 2 talks about Yahweh betrothing Israel to himself in righteousness and loving kindness. And so one of the reasons why we want to do it this way is because Yahweh did it this way. And I think we can all agree Yahweh is a great role model, right? If he's doing something and you're not specifically forbidden from doing it, there's a really good chance that's exactly what you should be doing. So, we want to be a follower of Yeshua. We want to copy the Messiah, not our culture, right? So, it's crazy. We have this idea, Yahweh creates the institution of marriage, and then in certain passages of Scripture, he describes what marriage looks like. But we got a lot of people, Christians, that look at those passages that describe what marriage looks like oh, I don't want to do that. Why would I practice marriage the way the Scriptures describe it when I could practice marriage the way Tom Cruise does it? It's like, I want to do it the way the world does it. I don't want to do it the way Scripture describes it. I mean, I'm not some member of a primitive tribe in the Middle East, It's like, but that's not the right attitude. It shows a lack of wisdom on that person's part. That they can look at Scripture and see that Yahweh created the institution of marriage. He describes what it looks like. He describes how it works. And we're like, yeah, I'm going to do something different. So it's not wise. So this is Revelation 19:7. Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife hath made herself ready. Right? We want to be ready for him. We want to be pure. We want to be walking in his ways. We want to make our garments white. Right? We want to do all these things. And any woman marrying an earthly man should want to do that for her earthly husband as well, right? And betrothal is a way that we can keep ourselves pure. The dating scene, even the courtship thing, you become emotionally attached to people and you awaken love before it's time. And you start to get attached to people, and it's not wise. And we want to be pure. We don't want to, go through all these idols. Oh, yeah, I tried Buddha. I tried Baal, and then I finally landed on Yahweh. It's like, that's not what we want to do. We want to save ourselves for Yahweh totally, and our women should want to save themselves totally for their husband.
So we find betrothal in actually a lot of places in the Scripture. I've had people say, yeah, well, it's like only mentioned once or twice, right? So this is just a listing of Scriptures. This is a bunch of different places that you can find betrothal or its principles. So you got like the story of Joseph and Mary. They're betrothed when Joseph is thinking about divorcing Mary, it's a strange concept to our culture that he hasn't taken her to live with him as a wife, but it would require a divorce for him to get rid of her. And part of this is the idea of a covenant. That's where betrothal starts, is with a covenant between the man and his wife. And some people will say, well, we don't need to do that. But what I usually submit back to them is that every Christian, except for a few fringe Christians obviously, but believes in a covenant of marriage. Now, many of them will make their covenant of marriage like hours before they leave on their honeymoon, so they have an hours-long betrothal, but they do make a covenant before they run off on their honeymoon, or at least they believe that that's what they're supposed to do, regardless of whether they fail that or not. So everyone agrees that there is a covenant that we enter. So everyone really more or less believes in betrothal. So really what's different here is that we're looking at putting a gap of time between that. And when we look in the Scripture, like Vera pointed out, there's a wooing, there's a preparing, a getting ready for the husband that happens during that betrothal period. And when we make the covenant before we start the wooing process, we make the covenant. When we do that, we're making a covenant based on what the Father's will is, what Yahweh's will is, instead of on what do we want, what do we like in the process. Because if you haven't wooed the person ahead of time, if you haven't done the romantic things, do you like this person or not? That's not why we marry. We marry because Yahweh is telling us. The difference between betrothed and married is just the physical relationship. They're already called husband and wife in the scripture, which is another thing to keep in mind. When you read a passage and it says something about husbands, like husbands love your wives, that applies to betrothal. They're already husband and wife. You're already called, you're already commanded to love your wife during the betrothal period. You can't break up without a divorce. They're already husband and wife legally. You'd have to have the divorce. The only difference is they have not entered the marriage bed. So how do you know which one is the one? Say there's the person that has everything I've ever wanted right there. That must be it. Well, that's not necessarily true. A lot of times it is, because Yahweh does prepare our desires and prepare our future spouse. A lot of times it is everything we ever wanted. Sometimes it doesn't look like that ahead of time. But really, that doesn't matter. What matters is whether or not Yahweh says, go for this. And from there, you make a covenant and you commit and you go through whatever that is. That's how we do with our relationship with Yeshua. Did we know everything about him when we committed to him, when we made covenant with him, when we accepted his offer of marriage and salvation? No, we didn't know everything that was going to be called within that. But as our relationship grows, we get closer and closer. We know more and more about him. We're able to be more pleasing to him.
So we know that a lot of y'all are familiar with the concept of betrothal and stuff. So we just ran through that quickly. What we really want to do is, does anyone have any questions, like how to practically apply betrothal, or have y'all seen any questions about?
Easy questions.
Yeah, keep them easy.
Josiah, get your paper out.
If they're not easy, I'm just gonna, Joshua, you can handle that one. So does anyone have any questions on how to apply betrothal, or have y'all seen any betrothals that have gone bad, and how to avoid that? Did they do something wrong, or anything like that?
Or just a particular aspect that you want us to expound on.
Flesh out for
we'll
you.
Try to.
Well, it seems like recently I've seen several betrothals, whatever you want to call it. Typically, when it falls apart, they say it wasn't really a betrothal. And honestly, a lot of the times it's the parents, specifically the dad, that starts to get cold feet after they've already said it's a go. And I think as parents, I guess I don't know the answer to that, other than you better be darn sure when you say yes to this. But backing out is, I believe what you're doing then is you're causing your children to sin, or possibly live the rest of their life in sin, if this was a betrothal, a covenant. And that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, like Joshua said earlier, in order for Joseph to get out of his betrothal with Mary, he had to divorce her, right? And I know there's lots of different opinions on what constitutes a biblical reason for divorce, but your dad telling you to divorce your spouse isn't one of them. I think most of us can agree. Your dad just can't tell you. And we see in Scripture, when Isaac blessed Jacob instead of Esau, it's like, I can't take the blessing back. It's been given. Your brother has been blessed. And when you give your blessing to your son or your daughter to get betrothed, and they get betrothed, that blessing has been given. You can't retract that. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think we also could draw information on that from Numbers 30, where it because you talked about a father might try to say, okay, we're not going to do this after all, after the words have been spoken, after a covenant's been made. And it doesn't give permission for a father to break his married daughter's vow. It gives permission for the husband to do that, which again is part of the idea of divorce. Would have to come from the husband's side at that point. And again, you'd have to have a valid biblical reason for that divorce, which in most of these cases you're talking about, there's nothing there.
And that's practically, when we see in Torah that it says that a father can annul a vow of his daughter the day he hears of it. That's why it's so important for the young man to get permission from the girl's father before he asks for her, because let's say he skipped her father, asks her, she says, "Yeah, I'll marry you." She makes this vow, "Yeah, I'll marry you." And then her dad hears it. He says, No, you're not marrying her. I annul that vow. That's why it's so important for the son to go to the dad first, get his permission. Basically, because then when the father is basically saying, "Yeah, I'm going to sign off on this," he's basically promising, he's making his own vow, that he's not going to annul his daughter's vow when you ask her and she says yes, if she says yes.
If the daughter's dad is passed away or not in the faith, what's it?
Two different situations. If her dad is dead, we actually see this in the Torah with the daughters of Zelophehad, and Moses says to them, they have to marry within the tribe, obviously, because they're heiresses, but let them marry who they think best. If they have no father, then the annulling of the vow doesn't exist for them, so they would have to do the best they can. Now, should they seek counsel from wise elders in their fellowship or whatever, or mentors or whoever they have, yes, absolutely, but there is no absolutely required permission for that.
And I would think that it would be a sign of good faith, for a young man who wants to marry a sister that only has brothers, to go to one of the brothers and say, "Hey, I respect you and I don't want to do anything, out of order here. Would you consider, praying about, me marrying one of your sisters," and kind of act as that counselor in that situation.
Yeah, and then the second half of the question, if her father is not in the faith. On that one,
Ask him anyway.
that one's a hard question, and I did not ask for hard questions. But my opinion would be that you should still ask him anyway. The probable outcome is going to be whatever. I don't care, and if he doesn't care, he's not annulling her vow. Then that is a covenant when you make it. If he doesn't annul it, so.
But if he's not in the faith, also I would encourage, if you're a young woman and your father's dead or not in the faith, I would still encourage you to find elder, that could not take his place. That's the wrong. But someone who could help you navigate finding a spouse.
Does the older brother even take on a larger role in that? Joshua, if your dad wasn't around anymore, are you not essentially the patriarch now of that family? And it would be in that role or not? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah, I think Barrett and I are going to disagree on that one, but
Yeah, probably.
yeah. So I would say that there is not a direct line of authority over the adults that remain, over those that are grown. So the woman in her father's house Numbers 30 is only about men and women. It's not about children. It uses the words for men and women. So I would say that those who are grown are not directly under a new authority when that happens, but that there is there's still a family headship that applies to general leading, but not necessarily to obedience.
Right, and I would say that, like I said, we might disagree on this, that there would be a familial structure that would still be there that needs to be recognized. So like when Israel came out of Egypt, there were, leaders of the tribes, and these were based on familial relations. They had the 12 princes, one prince for each tribe and stuff. And they had authority. Now we can argue about where that authority ends, what they have authority over. But there's definitely some kind of hierarchical structure there that I think should be recognized. Right.
And generally speaking, if, like I said, the point of betrothal is to listen to who Yahweh is telling you to make this covenant with. Generally speaking, if your authority is saying something, you better be paying very close attention, because that is one of the normal ways that Yahweh speaks, is through those He's placed in authority over you.
Yeah. If your parents are saying this is a good person, he's the right one, there's a really good chance he's the right one. Really good chance. Not that it can't do what?
First of all, thank you for doing this. Second of all, I appreciate the fact that you guys can agree to disagree on something. I feel like it gives us a more rounded picture on a very new subject. Third of all, what is it that, obviously you guys put a lot of work into this with stuff, and I know you guys have a YouTube channel and everything, for those of you who don't know. Why is this so important for you guys to do that? What is the passion part of this project for you guys?
Well, for me personally, it feels like it was, after I was betrothed and then married, it feels like the Father just laid it on me as a passion, as a ministry, or a calling, at least at this point. And to me, what I experienced in it was so beautiful, and the ability to relate, because of going through betrothal, to relate to our current relationship with Yeshua, that I think I just think there's so much there to be gained and learned by doing it. Yahweh gives us object lessons all the time, whether it's the feast, whether it's baptism, whether it's, whatever it is. Yahweh gives us object lessons, and marriage is one of His object lessons. And to do it the way He does it is an even better object lesson. That I want to see people be able to be drawn to Yeshua through their marriage, or to be able to have the design for marriage, because, to be honest, if you come into marriage with less baggage, it's easier.
Yeah, so for me, I think it's important because our marriages represent our relationship with Yeshua, and so we can actually start to, if we start to project onto Yeshua what we think about marriage. And if we don't have the right view of marriage, we're automatically going to get the wrong view of Yeshua. If you have this idea that, hey, I can divorce my wife because she burnt the cookies last night, or whatever, just something stupid like that. And there are people that believe this. I've talked to them, and I know it sounds crazy, but I've talked to them. And you'll end up having this idea, that Yeshua is just constantly looking for you to mess up so He can just get rid of you. And it starts to go into works-based salvation and a denial of salvation by grace through faith alone. And that's just from having a wrong view of marriage, So for me, I think it's important to get the right view of marriage, because it represents what our relationship with Yeshua. And also, I think there's a lot of benefit. It promotes purity. I'm talking about sexual purity. It also it's just the right thing to do. We want to do these things because they're the righteous thing to do. We want to walk in righteousness.
So maybe one little addition to that. So if you read the Torah and it says put tzitzit on the corners of your garment, Torah just assumed that you're wearing a garment, right? Well, Torah does the same thing with betrothal. It tells you things about betrothal with the assumption that you're practicing betrothal.
Yeah, all of the commandments about marriage, how to deal with, how to handle fornication. Oh, there's the kids here, so I don't want to get too detailed. But, all the scriptures that talk about how to deal with marriage and the problems with marriage, they all assume that you're practicing betrothal. They all assume that. There's no exceptions. You know, how you handle a guy who entices a virgin to lie with him who's not betrothed, you handle that differently, according to Torah, than a man who entices a virgin who is betrothed. You know, the statutes of going to war. You know, it says if a man is betrothed but he hasn't yet taken his wife, he can stay home. And in fact, I think it commands him to stay home, lest another man take her. You know, and so it assumes, all these things assume that this is what we're doing, this is how we do it. I think it's back to that, you know, Yahweh creates the institution of marriage, he describes how it works, and then, but we want to say, oh, that's just cultural. It's not really that important. We can elect to ignore it if we want. That's not how Scripture works. Second Timothy 3:16 and 17 says that all of Scripture, not some of Scripture, all of Scripture is profitable for doctrine and reproof and correction and instruction in righteousness, so that the man of Elohim will be complete and fully equipped for every good work. So that's a beautiful passage about the sufficiency of Scripture, but it's also a beautiful passage about, I guess what we could call the efficiency of Scripture. It's saying Yahweh didn't waste his breath. If there's something in Scripture, if there's a passage in Scripture, it's there because it's profitable for doctrine and reproof and correction and instruction in righteous living. So we can say a lot of things about different things in Scripture, but one of the things we can't say about anything in Scripture is that it's just cultural and we can elect to ignore it. You know, it's not important. Don't worry about it. That's not the case.
Amen.
On the point about culture, I'd like to share something. If it is cultural in the Bible, we should understand who the author of that culture is. It's an ordained culture by God, so it's a self-defeating argument.
Yeah, it's like, so are you really saying that the modern American culture is better than the biblical culture? That's why you're going with it over that? Or, you know?
Well, at least the Torah culture, the under Moses culture, Yahweh brought them out of Egypt. He said, hey, don't do like was done in Egypt. I'm taking you into Canaan. Don't do like what's being done in Canaan. In other words, when Yahweh gave the Torah to Moses, he was setting his culture.
Yeah, exactly.
The ideal culture, basically. So.
I got some, I guess maybe a two-part question. You guys probably are exposed to more people that have been through or been through the betrothal process. Maybe some that it hasn't worked well. What are you seeing is causing problems in this? Because we all probably know people that have failed at this. And so what I'm seeing now with our some of my kids, and I'm sure there's others, they're getting kind of gun shy of it. You know, we got to get to know them better. We got to do something different here. And so, what's your thoughts? It's sort of two parts. What are you seeing as been some of the problems, and how do we address our kids that are saying that, man, there's a problem out here? We need to do something different.
So one of the problems I've seen is I've seen this happen multiple times, and it's worked out sometimes, and it hasn't worked out and when it doesn't work out, it's created quite a mess sometimes. And that's the dad not being sure whether he's going to say yes or not to this request for his daughter, and then he goes and talks to the daughter about it. And it's like, why are you talking to your daughter about it when you don't even know what your answer is going to be? I've seen it and it's worked out, and I've seen it and it's not worked out. What has happened sometimes is the dad has gone to the daughter, she's gotten excited, and she's like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And then the dad came to the conclusion this wasn't from Yahweh. And she ended up being heartbroken, and it actually defeats the purpose of betrothal in the first place, you know, try and protect her heart. You know, he went ahead of time. He wasn't sure what his answer was going to be. So I would strongly recommend, that's one problem I've seen, I would strongly recommend, if you're a father and your daughter's been asked for, don't talk to her about it until you know that you think it's a good thing.
And from the other side of it, until you're sure that this is the direction Yahweh is taking you, it's not really appropriate to start broaching the subject to her or her father.
Oh, yeah. You talking about from the guy's point of view?
Right, from the other
right.
side.
don't go and ask a guy for his daughter if you're going to want to back out later. You got to be confident this is what Yahweh wants.
So, is your question more about the problems with getting into it, with making the decision and stepping out? And is that the type of problem that you're talking about, or are you talking about other types of problems like that might arise after everyone seems to be on the same page?
Yeah, I'd say most of the problems I've observed seem to manifest after a betrothal or a commitment or a something. Like I said, a lot of times they'll change. Well, it wasn't really a betrothal after they back out, because they recognize betrothal scripturally as a covenant. So they can't admit they broke a covenant. That's what I'm seeing.
The problem with that is that either the parents are just being deceptive, they're just lying to everybody. No, it wasn't a betrothal when it was, which isn't a great situation. Or they're just extremely ignorant. You don't go into a betrothal thinking you can just call it off willy-nilly. When Scripture says, no, it requires a divorce to get out of this. That's not something. So either they're liars or they're ignorant, and both need to be corrected.
Which part of the idea of the Betrothal Guys YouTube channel and the website and the stuff we share on social media is to get that out there, to make sure that people are understanding what betrothal is before they try to practice it, because it is not something to be taken lightly. Now, I think that there can be a slight difference between an engagement, we could call it, and a betrothal. An engagement is you are giving your word to make a covenant with someone in the future, and a betrothal is making a covenant then and there. Both of them are your word, and you should live up to your word, especially if you're not. It does seem like you can be released from a promise, but not a covenant. So, like when Abraham's servant is being sent to get Rebecca ultimately, he said, "What if she won't come back?" And Abraham said, "In that case, you're released." So, I would say that it's possible for someone to release you from an engagement, but you gave your word, and so even in that, to walk away from that, it seems to me like it reflects poorly on ultimately it reflects poorly on Yahweh, because He keeps His word, and we as His people, we should speak the things and then do them.
We get a lot of people that are going through some of these processes, and we've seen and heard of people that have gone to the point of betrothal. Maybe they call it that, maybe they don't call it that, or whatever. And then you've got somebody backing out of it. What happens to the injured party, shall we say? And give an example: a man, a woman, young man, young woman get betrothed. Then one of them backs out, and according to some of us in this room, they would still remain married because there's no divorce. And what happens to a young man who the father of the bride rejects or removes his blessing in his mind and tells the girl she can't get married? What happens to this young man who is married? What's his choices? So that's what people, I think, want to hear too.
Okay, so it depends on if the girl is still willing to marry him. They're already married. He can just go take her. He doesn't need it. The only requirement he needs to go take her is his own father's permission, because her father has no say in when the young man is supposed to come and get his bride. Once he's given his blessing, once he's signed off, the father,
He's gone by.
yeah, and after the son said on that vow that his daughter's made, he has no say in when the young man comes to get her. That's up to the young man's father. And so, if she's still willing for him to come take her, he should just go and take her, even against her father's will. That's my opinion.
Yeah, if she's willing. But a lot of times, what happens is that the father convinces his daughter that no, that didn't exactly happen. And yeah,
In that situation, what he could do, and he could wait, and hope for her, and her dad to come around. He could take a second bride. He can. It's a horrible. It's really a horrible. He's in a horrible situation because he's married to a woman that won't come to him.
That's my point. Is there's an actual injured party?
There's an injured party, and so he
it could be a lifelong.
It could be a lifelong thing.
Problem.
No, that wouldn't be a justifiable reason to sever a contract.
See, I don't think if she were, let's say, she were to go and get married to someone else, then she will have committed fornication, and in my opinion, that would be grounds for him to give her a bill of divorcement at that point. But he can't give her a bill of divorcement until she's committed some kind of sexual immorality. That's my opinion.
Is abandonment and withholding yourself from your husband sexual immorality? I don't think that it qualifies as the kind of sexual immorality that we're looking for. David, an example of this, David was not able to have Michael, that he had betrothed himself for 300 Philistine foreskins. And he's running for his life and all these things. When he became king, he was able to force her to come back. And she had already married someone else, but he still forced her to come back and be his. It's not a great situation. If you're going to get betrothed, just go through with it.
Yeah, I just want us to be careful as young people about pinning it on the ideology that God has set out, saying, there's got to be a problem with back off it. I don't think you're going to find a better way. So,
and
through it.
yeah, that's a good point. And we say, well, what better way are you talking about doing? Dating, courting, and those don't have any better statistics. Like you said, you find the divorce rate in America right now is what, 44.6%, of all marriages ending divorce. That's really sad. It's really sad. And they're supposedly getting to know them ahead of time so they don't have to get divorced later on. And it's clearly not working. They want to get to know them, and they want to develop romantic feelings for them. But the thing is, if you're developing romantic feelings before there's a commitment, those romantic feelings are going to blind you to their faults. They're not, that time period of dating or courting is not going to help you evaluate whether you should marry them or not. Because you're developing romantic feelings for them, you're just going to ignore their faults, and you're going to marry them anyway. Whereas when you pray about it, and you're like, hey, I think this might be the person, you're thinking about it spiritually foremost. Then you go to your dad, hey, Dad, would you pray with me about this girl? And he prays with you, and you're both thinking more spiritually. You're not developing these romantic feelings, or you shouldn't be developing these romantic feelings for this girl. You're supposed to be evaluating this idea objectively and spiritually. And you have your dad pray about it. And then if he's like, yeah, let's approach her dad, have him pray about it. And then if he's like, yeah, I think I'm getting a confirmation this is from Yahweh, then we can go to the girl. But if you're going around and trying to develop romantic feelings, thinking you're going to be more objective about the person, that's not going to happen.
And so how do you encourage the young people to not just listen to the stories of discouragement around them, but to be filled with the Spirit and we're called not to fear. And so I think the fear really trickles in there when you start seeing things not work out. We feel it's going to happen. But how, as parents, do you encourage your children to go forward anyway?
Well,
So, to me, ultimately, it's like any other big decision in life. There can be some fear there, but what casts out fear? What casts out fear is perfect love, and the perfect love that casts out fear is your perfect love, not for the other person, but for Yahweh, for Yeshua. And so it's because of your love for Yeshua and your trust in Him that the fear can be pushed away. That's the only way the fear goes away, is when you know that you are following Yeshua and that He has you in His hand, no matter what happens.
I think that's what the kids need to really.
Right. It is to me, to some extent, if you have fear over something, that's a symptom of a heart issue, and we all do it. I have fears, various fears, that's a symptom of a heart issue. That's something that I need to ask the Father to take away, to be bold, to walk in His will that He's revealed.
My question for the young person would be, so you see these betrothals that were clearly not handled biblically, according to the biblical model of betrothal, and you're afraid that betrothal, there's a problem with it. It's like when it wasn't the biblical model that was in question, it was their mishandling of it. Even the parents lied and said it wasn't a betrothal when it was. Or, they were ignorant and they didn't know it was a betrothal that they were getting into, which is like, that's horrible. They look at these supposed failed betrothals and they're like, oh, I'm scared of betrothal now. Like, but why aren't you looking at the failed marriages that started out with dating or courting? Why aren't you afraid of those methods? It's an excuse. They're just bringing up an excuse to not do something.
And I think you did touch on it. It is or can be a scary thing. Even when you know something is Yahweh's will, it can be a scary thing to step out over the edge of that cliff that looks like it could be, how far down is it in this fog, and where will I land? It is a trust in Yahweh that allows betrothal to work.
I was definitely doing the whole betrothal thing and did not want to go that route. My parents had talked about it before, and after God had really, that perfect love came in and He showed me what it was, that's what changed my heart. And so it's not really trying to avoid all the bad stuff that's going to happen. What it's about is a love relationship between you and the Father, and there's blessings and benefits that come from that. But it's really about your love relationship with God. So when you have that download like I had, it's all of a sudden, you know what? Maybe I don't know Yeshua that well, maybe not, but it's more about an adventure that I'm going on with Yeshua. And this is the path that He's leading me down. And I don't think you can go wrong if you're putting that first.
Yeah, to walk down the path that He calls you to. And there's actually an example in Scripture with Hosea. God told Hosea, marry this woman and it's not going to be fun. Okay? So you can't assume that because you can see that this is not going to be fun, that therefore it's wrong.
My wife, she told me once, I don't know where she gets this stuff, but she told me, she said, marriage isn't there to make you happy, it's there to make you holy. And when you want to be holy, it makes you happy. But you know what I'm saying? So maybe she's reading all these marriage books that I don't read. So
She just said that.
oh, did she?
I know.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think you're right, Sam. Our primary goal should be to follow Yahweh wherever He leads, and a lot of times beneficial side effects, not in the case of Hosea, but a lot of times beneficial side effect is that we do avoid a lot of the pitfalls that the world falls into.
Hosea may have a happy ending. Where it ends is that he goes and redeems her and brings her back and says that they're going to wait for each other. So it is possible that just like we know the Yahweh story, Yahweh and Israel story, that one is painting, that Hosea also may have had a happy ending story.
Right.
Let's not knowingly put ourselves in an inferior situation and say, well, He's going to rescue me.
Yeah, doing something in ignorance is one thing. Knowing and going on anyway is where the blessing and the grace of Yahweh is much less likely to be received there. He's very gracious and full of compassion, but you're definitely tempting.
And watch out, because and I have a friend and I love him dearly, but people tend to accuse things and say, well, I tried betrothal and it didn't work for me, when they really didn't actually do betrothal. I have a friend and I love him dearly, but he's gone through 2 betrothals and they didn't work out. And he's like, I just don't like betrothal because it doesn't work. I'm like, you didn't really do betrothal. That wasn't betrothal what you were doing. That was courtship. And yeah, you can run into problems with that. So don't let people, a lot of times people try and equivocate. And they say, oh, betrothal doesn't work. When they're not actually critiquing betrothal at all. They're critiquing something else. They're critiquing a lying parent. Something else. Yeah, straw man.
So, what do you do with people who are afraid of betrothal, not because they've seen it fail, but because it doesn't provide them with that romance that is portrayed on TV and in movies and in society?
Good question, Josiah.
First off, that is a big problem. The Disney marriage, the I'm going to be happily ever after, I'm going to get fulfillment from my marriage. This is what I'm going to rely on to feed me, is entering marriage with a selfish attitude. That's not going to work. Okay, you can't. Marriage is a ministry that you go into for the sake of the other person, for the sake of Yahweh's kingdom, not for your own sake. If you go into it for yourself, you're going into it selfish, and you've already broken half of the marriage.
Yeah. Right. And romance grows during the betrothal period. And I know that Braden and Tally are real big, and hey, don't awaken love before it's time. Don't awaken love before it's time. That's really important. If you awaken love before it's time, it leads to one person becoming really emotionally attached to the individual, to the other person, and then the other person's like, yeah, I'm not going to do this, and someone's heart gets broken, So you want the romance to grow, and it even says, husbands, love your wives, and we're supposed to love our wives in that betrothal period. We're commanded to love our wives. We want the romance to grow in the betrothal period, when you can know I can give my heart to this person, and they're committed to me fully. They're not going to abandon me. And so that way you have that safety net. You can say, hey, I can give this man my heart, and he's sworn, that he'll never forsake me. And so we want romance to grow, but we want it to grow at the right time.
And most of you all watched Dayton and Abigail's story. They testified to that it did work that way. The commitment led to the in-love feelings, to the romance. I can say the same for me. I was amazed at how quickly you could go from yes, I commit, to the head over heels in love, the feelings and such that are described as love. That's not true love, but it is a beautiful part of that relationship when it's time.
So you touched earlier on imitating Yahweh, because she does total, she's total. So would you say that the world's definition of love and romance is wrong, and that's where we're messing up, that we're not imitating what Yahweh calls love and romance?
Yeah, I think so, to a large degree. What the world calls love is really just lust. And it's great to lust for your wife. It's not great to lust for a woman who's not your wife. Love is probably more of a commitment, and you touched on. I think love has more to do with commitment than lust, biblically speaking. You're committed to protect this person, be with this person, for rich or poor, the classic, vows and stuff. So I would say love probably has more to do with commitment than lust, personally.
So now how do you raise your children to have the right views of this?
To have the right what? To have the right what?
Have the right views of, the idea of what real love is and what real romance is.
You teach them.
You teach it. You model it. Modeling it, that is the hard answer to the hard question.
All right, we're running low on time.
I'm sure we're going to be talking about betrothal around the camp and stuff too, but we are hitting our time goal. So,
yeah. All right. Hey, Sam, do you want to close us out in prayer?